Scott Morrison calls them the quiet Australians. Robert Menzies called them the forgotten people. Under John Howard, they were called Howard's battlers. Whatever you call them, right of centre mainstream governments do best when they listen to the people who aren't noisy, don't join protests or make a fuss, but are busy getting on with their lives, creating opportunities for their families, and who expect governments to get on with the task of implementing the will of the people. A large part of the reason Menzies and Howard were so successful and Morrison pulled off a difficult election win is because they innately understand this, or understood it in the case of others. The will of the people is not found on Twitter or in the opinion polls or at noisy street protests. The will of the people is exercised at the ballot box, and it usually reflects good old common sense. This is the context through which we have to view this Brexit debacle in the UK. The people, mainstream Brits, had their say in the referendum years ago, declaring they wanted out of the EU. This was a wise and instinctive decision. They wanted Britain to regain its sovereignty and to stop surrendering it to faceless bureaucrats and self-indulgent politicians in Brussels. But Britain's political class and its so-called elites and media never wanted to leave. As usual, the political media class was wrong, remains wrong, and doesn't understand its own myopia, its own enslavement to political fashion. And because of all of that, the political class in Britain has failed to implement the will of the people. They've thumbed their nose at the referendum result and tried to prevent the UK exiting the UK, imposing conditions and timelines that keep changing and resisting a no-deal Brexit at any cost, even at the cost of having one of the most important and influential democracies in the world thwart the will of the people. Boris Johnson has assumed the leadership at the last gasp in a desperate bid to deliver the will of the people. He gets it. In order to resolve it, he's happy to go to an election, to go to voters and allow them to decide whether his government should finish what it started.
The country must now decide whether the leader of the opposition or I go to those negotiations in Brussels on the 17th of October to sort this out, because everybody will know that if the right honourable gentleman were to go there, were to be the Prime Minister, he would beg for an extension.
But the Labor Party, Liberal Democrats and even many of his own Tories are so intent on blocking Brexit that they suddenly don't want an election unless they can delay the UK's exit first. These Labor, Liberal Democrat and Tory MPs are siding with Brussels over London, with chaos over decisiveness, with Parliament over government and with the EU over the will of the British people. I can't predict where this will end, but it's always the case that you ignore the will of quiet mainstream voters at your great peril.